John here from Great Lakes Country. Did you know you can make your own paprika at home from scratch? All it really takes is a food dehydrator and something to grind it up with, like a spice grinder or a food processor. And if you like smoked paprika, that's super simple to do as well, but you will need some way to smoke your peppers first. So in this video, we're gonna go through every step to make our own amazing batch of homemade smoked paprika that's gonna be way better than the store-bought stuff. Now for the quote normal paprika that we're probably used to using in America, it's just made from red bell peppers. And that's what we're gonna be using today. But there are other kinds of paprika, and you may have heard of something called Hungarian paprika, which is used from a different kind of pepper that is red, but is not the same thing as a red bell pepper. Today, we're going pretty standard. We're using a whole bunch of red bell peppers. We're gonna cut them up, we're gonna smoke them on the smoker, and then we're gonna dehydrate them, grind them all up, and that's gonna give us our beautiful paprika. So let's get right into it and start dealing with all of these red bell peppers. So here we got 14 pretty nice sized red bell peppers. And the first thing we have to do is simply cut them up, get rid of the seeds and the membrane, and get them ready to go in the smoker. And really, it doesn't matter all that much how you go about doing this, but I guess the way that I prefer to do it is to cut it up into some kind of medium width wedges. And first, I'll just start slicing away some of these outer walls so I can expose the seeds and all that pith and membrane and so forth. And this thing right here, I can pretty much get rid of any pithy white stuff like that. And of course, slice away any of these seeds and get all that out of there. And I find it pretty handy once I slice everything away that I don't want in there to just run each piece under the faucet real quick, just to rinse all those extra seeds out of there. And once I got my nicely de-seeded pieces, I'll just cut them into some pieces, maybe about that wide. You could go a little thinner, you could go a little thicker. You could even just cut these peppers into rings. But this is the way that I like to do it, and I think I can maximize the space on my smoker by doing it this way. Just trying to get them a little smaller. And realistically, you could probably just cut these things in half, core out those seeds, and it'd be fine too. But breaking them down a little bit like this, like I said, lets me make a little better use of the space in my small smoker. So I won't make you watch while I go ahead and do the same thing to the rest of these peppers, so we'll jump ahead a little bit when we're ready to move on. All right, here we've got all of our seeded and cut up red bell peppers, and now we're moving outside to the smoker. I'm gonna be using my offset smoker, so I'll get a chimney with some good lump hardwood charcoal fired up. Throw a little wood split in there for good measure. When it's all nice and hot, I'll dump that into the firebox of the smoker. Let the whole thing come up to temperature for a little while. This is gonna be a pretty low temp smoke, and I want the internal temperature of the smoke chamber to stay at about 180 degrees for the duration of this cook. And because really small offset smokers like this make it pretty tricky to maintain those very low temperatures like that, I'm gonna have to pay attention to this thing pretty much steadily for the full 2 hours that we're smoking these. Anyway, I'll just get my bell pepper pieces laid out on the grate, skin side down. I'll try not to let them be all bunched up into each other, but if they're touching a little bit on the sides, that's okay. And just load about as many in there as I think I can fit. And if I have to do this in a couple batches, well, that's okay too. When the smoker's all loaded up, I'll go ahead and close the lid and just let these smoke away at that 180 degrees for the next 2 hours. Yes, you could go less than that, or you could go more than that. It all depends on how much smoky flavor you want your paprika to have. For me, I think 2 hours at 180 is just about the sweet spot. And we're doing that pretty low 180 degrees because we don't want to actually cook these peppers. If they get a little bit sweated down or a little roasty, maybe that's okay, but we really don't want them to be fully cooked. So we'll check back in a little while and see how these peppers are looking. Now real quick, I wanted to talk about the smoking step of these peppers. If you don't own a smoker, you can still absolutely do this. I have smokers, so I'm gonna use them for this. But if you don't, and you just have a normal barbecue or grill of any sort, you can absolutely use that thing to cold smoke stuff. And you can absolutely cold smoke peppers to make smoked paprika. All you need is one of these smoke tubes. These things are really inexpensive. It's just a mesh metal tube that you fill with some of these pellet grill pellets. You get it lit up, you let the flame burn for a minute, then blow it out, and these pellets just smolder away for a few hours, imparting lots of good smoke flavor into whatever's near them. Here's a clip of me using my smoke tube to cold smoke some mozzarella cheese. All you need to do is set this smoking pellet tube in your grill next to all of the cut up peppers that you've laid out, close the lid, and let it smoke for a while. You may need to let it go a little longer than if you were burning hardwood splits like I'm doing, but just give it about 3 hours and you're gonna have some good smoky peppers to make your smoked paprika. So here we are about an hour into the smoking. These pepper slices aren't looking too much different after that time at these relatively low smoking temps, but I can see that they are starting to get a little dried out, and there's a couple of little edges nearest the firebox that are looking like they've taken a little heat. But I know they're getting a lot of good smoke flavor, and we're just gonna let them go for another hour and then pull them out of there. All right, now we're back inside and it's time to do the dehydration step. So I'm just gonna start loading up these trays for the dehydrator. Once again, I'm gonna go skin side down and just start laying out these pieces. I will definitely take care to not have them pushed up against each other because I wanna get some good airflow all the way around. Nothing too crazy about this step, just getting these things laid out, and I'll use as many of these trays as I need, and my big old dehydrator can hold 9 of these trays, so I think I'll have plenty of room to work with. And there we go. I only ended up needing to use 4 of these trays, so as I always do, I'll go ahead and kind of space them out a little bit. Definitely don't need them to be right on top of each other since we've got some room to work with in here. Now I'm going to turn this dehydrator on and set it to the vegetable setting, which is about 125 degrees. And I'm just gonna let it run for many, many hours until these peppers are 100% dehydrated. This will probably take somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 24 hours. And I'll mention that there's certain things that I highly recommend dehydrating outside. That is, putting the whole machine either outside or in the garage or somewhere that is not in your house. Onions, I absolutely recommend this because they will fill your entire house with the most noxious onion smell you've ever experienced. Hot peppers, another thing. They're gonna fill your house with basically irritants in the air, and it's probably gonna make you sneeze or cough. With bell peppers, I wouldn't really worry about this, except that these have been smoked for a couple hours and they do smell quite smoky. And as this dehydrator starts running and the fan in there starts blowing, it might start to make my house smell a little bit like that smoke. So if that happens, I may still take this thing outside. This time of year, there's a lot of circulation in the house. I'm not really sure that's gonna be needed, but it's something that I may end up doing. Anyway, I'm gonna throw the front cover on this thing, turn the dial to 125, plug it in, and we're dehydrating. So we'll pick this back up sometime tomorrow and move on to actually turning our dehydrated peppers into our smoked paprika. And here we are. This actually took quite a bit of time to fully dehydrate these. These must have been some particularly juicy peppers because these things were in the dehydrator for about 30 hours. But that's okay. You definitely want them to be 100% dry, very crisp, very crunchy, not really bendy or rubbery or sticky or anything like that. They need to be completely and absolutely dry. So I'll just get all of my trays dumped out onto this little baking sheet here. And all those peppers sure get reduced down to an awful small looking amount. But that's how it goes with dehydration. And now the next step is basically the last step, and that's to get these broken down and ground up into a powder. And there's a couple ways you could do this. A lot of people use a food processor. Some people do it the old-fashioned way with a mortar and pestle. I suppose you could even use a little spice grinder or coffee bean grinder, although you'd only be able to do a few of these peppers at a time. Me, I like to use a little bit of an unconventional tool for this step and for pretty much grinding up all the things that I'm turning into my own homemade spices. And that's my little miniature grain mill. I really like using this thing because it creates a pretty consistent grain when I'm grinding something up into powder, rather than you throw all these into a food processor, run that thing forever and just spin it and grind and beat to make sure that everything in there is totally broken down into a powder. But as for the stuff that turned into a powder early on, you're just continuously grinding and chopping and processing that. And so you get some inconsistent sized grain. Some of it is just absolutely dust. Some of it's a little more chunky or textured. I like it all to be consistent, and that's where this grain mill comes in. But for these things to fit through the grain mill, I have to sort of break my little pepper pieces up into just some smaller little bits. I don't have to go crazy. I'll just give each one of them a couple of little breaks. And something like this is gonna go in there a lot better than a long piece like this. So this will just take me a couple minutes to snap all these things into a few different pieces. And while I'm doing that, I'll mention that I did end up moving this entire dehydrator outside into my garage because within just a little while of running it, I definitely was noticing a pretty strong smoke smell permeating my kitchen. But that's how it goes. Smoking those peppers definitely imparted a lot of smokiness into them. And then once you start blowing warm air at them, it's bound to make the room pretty much smell like that smoke. So something to keep in mind if you're gonna do this for yourself. If you're doing regular paprika, you probably don't need to worry about it. If you're doing smoky paprika, well, maybe put your dehydrator in the garage or outside or something like that. Now it's time to start grinding these up with the little grain mill. So I'll just drop a bunch of these pepper pieces into the top. And now I'll just get to cranking away. Yes, I do have an electric drill attachment for this thing that I could use instead of the crank handle, but I figure for the sake of the video, I'll do it the old-fashioned way, but more importantly, the quieter way, because that drill makes a whole lot of noise and you'd never hear me talking over top of it. As for the grain coarseness setting on this thing, I'm going with pretty much coarse setting that it can do. Because again, I'm not trying to make absolute dust. I want some very little granules, I want powder, but this thing doesn't need to be so beaten down into nothing that it's just drifting off into the air instead of falling into my little pan here. But ultimately that doesn't really matter, it's just a matter of personal preference. I just happen to think that not going especially super ultra fine results in the best granulated spice of whatever sort. And there we have it, all of our beautiful ground paprika ready to go. And that means the very last thing we have to do is put it into some kind of a container. And here I've got a little spice jar that at one point had some store-bought spice in it. I don't even remember which. Just cleaned it up, removed the label, and it's the perfect little receptacle for my homemade paprika. So we just need a little funnel and we can start spooning it in. Perfect. And as you can see, I've still got enough to probably fill up about another 1.5 or 2 of these things. So there you have it. As with a lot of homemade dry spices and seasonings, there's not a whole lot that goes into it. You really just gotta break the thing down, dehydrate it until it's absolutely dried, then grind it up into a powder or granulated form. Store it in an airtight container of some sort, and you're gonna have some delicious homemade onion powder, paprika, garlic powder, or whatever else on hand to use whenever you want. And if you end up making some of this smoked paprika for yourself, I'd love to hear in the comments how it turned out and how you like it. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future cooking and DIY food videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm John, and this is Great Lakes Country.